So this is the practice test for the Unit 4B test. So it's a sine wave model for the mean low water level for Bar Harbor, Maine at standard local time t can be found using this data. What is the amplitude of the wave? Notice it said a sine wave model. So since it says a sine wave model, kind of like a quadratic model or a linear model or an exponential model, what we can do is we can go to our calculator and I can go to Stat and Edit and I can enter the data. Notice I've already entered it. For the x values, I put 2, 6, 9, 12, and 15. And for the y values, I put 0.9, 5.97, 11.5, 5.87, and 0.78. Then I can go to Stat and Calc, and I need to look for a sine model. And look, right there. So I'm going to hit Enter. And there's my sine model. The amplitude is my A value, so 5.44. It didn't say what to round to. Let's go to 2 decimal places, 5.44. Okay, my next equation says a certain sound wave has the equation y equals 35 cosine of 22 pi t. What is the equation of a sound wave with twice the frequency and half the intensity? Remember, intensity is amplitude, and frequency is the reciprocal of the period. And because you're going to double it, but then you're going to take, well, first of all, whatever we do to x, we do the opposite. So if we divide by 2, but then we take the reciprocal, which means we actually multiply by 2, we can simply double this. So we end up with half of 35, which is 17.5 cosine, and double the 22, so 44 pi t. Number 3. What equation describes a phase shift of pi over 3, a period of 3 pi, an amplitude of 6, and the parent function y equals sine of x? Okay, remember when I write an equation, I want to have the a, b, c, and d values. Amplitude is 6, that's the a value. The c value is right pi over 3. So the c value is actually going to be negative pi over 3. There is no, it doesn't say anything about it moving up, so I guess the d value is 0. And 2 pi over b equals the period. So 2 pi over b equals 3 pi. Need to find b, cross multiply. 3 pi b equals 2 pi. I'm solving for b, so divide by 3 pi. b equals 2/3. It's a sine equation, so y equals 6 times the sine of 2/3 times x minus pi over 3. And that's it, because there is no d value. Right? Next one. If y equals 2 times the cosine of 4x minus pi over 6, what is the value of y when x equals pi over 4? So I'm going to substitute a pi over 4 in for x. Times pi over 4 minus pi over 6. So y equals 2 times the cosine. These 4's cancel, and I'm left with pi minus pi over 6. So y equals 2 times the cosine pi minus pi over 6 is 5 pi over 6. So what is the cosine of 5 pi over 6? I'm going to think real quick about my unit circle, and I'm going to think about my pi over 6 family. My pi over 6 family has the square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, and square root of 3 over 3. So 5 pi over 6 is over here, which means my x value is negative, and x value is what I want because it's cosine. So y equals 2 times negative the square root of 3 over 2, because over here I'd have negative square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, and this is the value that I want. The 2's cancel, and I'm left with negative the square root of 3. Next question is number 6. What is the amplitude in the graph above? Let's see. My axis would be here, because I'm 1 up and 1 down. Since I'm 1 up, my amplitude is 1. What is the exact value of the sine of 120 pi? Sine, by the way, is the y coordinate. And 120 pi, because it's even, is on this side of the unit circle. So it's 0. What is the exact value of the sine of 11 pi over 6? Again, I'm looking at my pi over 6 family, but I'm going to be down here. My pi over 6 family is square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2 down here, negative square root of 3 over 3. Sine is the y coordinate, so it's negative 1/2. What is the exact value of the cosine of negative 7 pi over 4? All right. Let's see. It's my pi over 4 family. 7 pi over 4 is here, which means negative 7 pi over 4 must be up here. So square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, and 1. Cosine is my x coordinate. So it's the square root of 2 over 2. Okay. Let's look at this one. What is the range of this equation? First, I notice it's not in standard form yet. I need to pull that 2 out. So y equals negative 5 times the sine of 2. Since I'm pulling the 2 out, I have to divide by 2. So I get x minus pi over 2 plus 4. Range means my y values. In other words, the high and low. It's going from this low value to this high value, and it's always the axis plus the amplitude or the axis minus the amplitude. The axis is at 4, and the amplitude is 5. So plus 5 or 4 minus 5. This negative really doesn't matter. It just tells me that my sine curve is turned upside down, but the amplitude is still up and down 5. So 9 is the high, negative 1 is the low. So my range is negative 1 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 9. What is the phase shift for this equation? Again, I've got to pull that 2 out in order for it to be in standard form. Since I'm pulling the 2 out, I have to divide by 2 here. X minus 3 pi over 2 minus 7. Phase shift is the opposite of this. So since it says minus 3 pi over 2, it must be plus 3 pi over 2, which would be to the right. What is the period? All right, once again, need to pull this 2 out. So I get y equals 4 times the cosine of 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, and I get x minus 3 pi over 2 minus 7. 2 pi divided by b equals the period. So 2 pi divided by 2, because b is 2, equals pi. Number 13, we're using this graph to answer these questions. If a cosine equation is written for the graph, what is the phase shift? Let's first draw on that axis. Since I'm going to write, well, I don't have to write the equation. All I need is the phase shift for cosine. So my starting values here. This one is the closest, and it's moved to the right. If this is pi, this must be pi over 2. So it's moved right, pi over 2, which is positive pi over 2. What is the period of the graph? Okay. See, I'm actually going to use my sine curve to figure out the period. The period is actually just 2 pi. My sine curve is here. One full curve takes 2 pi. For number 15, we're supposed to look at the graph, and we're supposed to write the sinusoidal. That is a very fancy word for the sine equation for this graph. All right, I'm going to start off by drawing my axis, and I check it, 1 up, 1 down. Draw my key points. Since I'm looking for sine, I want it to start at the axis and go up. Well, it actually starts right there. There is no phase shift. Okay, so that's definitely going to be my closest one because it's on the y-axis. Let's start doing our A, B, C, and D values. But I could show all of my signs, but this is obviously the one that I'm going to use. Amplitude is 1 up and 1 down, so it's 1. The D value, the axis is moved up to 3. It has no phase shift. The period is still 2 pi, which means 2 pi divided by b equals the period, which is 2 pi. So b is just 1. So what's my sine equation? Y equals 1 times the sine of 1 times x plus 3. And lastly, on the grid at the right, graph the sine of x on the domain negative pi, 2 pi to 2 pi. I'm going to let this be my, because each of these is going to be a pi over 2. So this is pi. And then this would be 2 pi. So half of a pi, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. So this is like my 4 corners. Same thing here. This would be my pi and my 2 pi. And then these are my pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. I'm going to let this be my 1 and this be my negative 1. Sine, I know, starts at 0, 0 and goes up, comes back down. I feel like I've drawn sine enough or seen it enough that I know that. Going the other way, goes down and back up. And this last question I'll do on the next video.